an average guy comes across an object of occult origin, which is a piece of cloth that he comes across and accidentally unleashes Armageddon on New York City, and he's trying to survive this kind of onslaught of alien creatures that have consumed New York. And that's basically the premise. Is a very kind of simple, straightforward premise. But the comic itself really was it kind of is a combination of my love of cinema and of comics, specifically older comics like the EC comics, the horror comics, things like that, and just more traditional comics where everything was done, hand lettering and inking with a brush. And, I like the older work. So just is a hybrid of basically everything I like and just put it into one thing. And so it's kind of a hybrid, like of a kind of like love of cinema, love of comics, together. That's what it was. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean that actually came through a lot. There was a couple of moments. I don't know if you I don't know how like into animation and stuff you are, but there's a lot of the action shots and stuff and kind of like character reaction shots that remind me a lot of the stuff they were doing in the Animatrix when
Hmm.
they kind of like took inspiration from anime and did it in like an American style.
Right, right,
Specifically like that sketch where like the kids riding on the skateboard, the way that the liney action and stuff is.
right, right.
There was a lot of that to it, and I really loved that because it felt like I was watching it in motion.
Hmm.
And it definitely seemed like the artwork followed what was written on the page, but the page definitely had like this very like breakneck pacing,
Yeah,
and there was almost scenes where it would cut back to show like almost give you a break so you could catch your breath, and it would show like kind of these slower moments,
yeah,
like the cop smoking the cigarette. So
right.
I guess kind of how did you frame the action and the pacing in this? Because I thought it was really cool the way it bounced back and forth.
Yeah, the book actually originally was drawn. The original idea was drawn in just many years ago when I was in college. I did like just 6 pages, and it had no words. It was just 6 pages, and it was the same idea except condensed into 6 pages. So there wasn't really much going on. It was just creatures bursting out of a wall, and then him running across the street. And this time it was like a huge like truck came by and like smashed the aliens, and he kind of got away at the last second. But years later, I was kind of like looking for writers to work with to do a comic, and I never came across like a writer who's kind of like a script enticed me enough. And eventually I was like, you know what, I think I want to do something on my own. But because I was kind of frustrated even going to comic book shops, like I just wanted to see a specific kind of a book that I had in my head. And at that time, even though now I kind of appreciate the superhero stuff, I didn't really want to do a superhero thing, and I just wanted to do something that was really different. So I took that premise, which was 6 pager, and I said, okay, I'm gonna do it again, but this time I'm gonna make it bigger, more ambitious, um, with writing and everything, and lettering and everything. I do everything myself, and so that's kind of what kind of got it rolling. But from then on, you know, I realized that I don't. The book actually went through a lot of editing. There's
Hmm.
entire panels that I redrew that were cut out and pasted, pages that were removed, pages that were added. There was a lot of things that are going on because to me, every page has to be interesting. Like even if it's like a conversation, you can keep the reader there if the dialogue is like pulling you in, and also the
Hmm.
way you draw it. But really, the dialogue is everything in those instances. But so I kind of just like basically thumbnail everything and just try to make every page work in terms of a composition. But even though I did make a lot of mistakes, but I would always go back and correct them. And I wish I had maybe I wish I if you take the original pages and maybe lightbox it, you could still see some of the original panels underneath the pasted ones. Because I
Oh,
did
okay.
make a lot of changes along the way. But so that's kind of what I went about. But real quick, when it comes to the animation, you know, um, I do like animation. I love I'm a big fan of like the older kind of like golden age, like let's say for example the Max Fleischer Superman. I think especially if you see it on Blu-ray now, that stuff looks absolutely gorgeous. The Max Fleischer Superman. It's just the drawing is so, the thing I take away from animation is, which is what I'm learning now, and I kind of made that mistake doing the book, and I'll tell you about what I mean in terms of like, because I was showing the book to professionals, as I
Yeah.
was making it, and like Eric Larson said to me, you got to find a way to simplify this, because if you're trying to make a deadline, I mean, it's like almost impossible, especially
Yeah.
if you're doing it yourself. It's like you gotta, so I would look at animation, and I noticed in animation their drawings are very simple, but they're
Hmm.
really good drawings. They're
Hmm.
simple, but they're really strong. So Max Fleischer, it's, or like let's say a Miyazaki. I'll look at a Miyazaki
Hmm.
drawing, and it's just so simple
Hmm.
but so strong. Snow White. I look at that, the
Yeah.
older animation. So anyway, kind of ran on there for a little bit.
No, that's
But
fine. Like I threw a huge amount of content at you, and you kind of nailed it. Like
right,
that's awesome that you were able to take those 6 pages and expand them out into this one. I
yeah,
think I read it 28 pages. So
yeah, yeah,
and it's a one shot, and it's like a full story, and that's what I really liked. I love the way that it kind of like just picks up, and it's just moving, 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 and you
yeah.
get to the end, and there wasn't an apparent conclusion to all that, but I
Hmm.
really liked it.
Yeah.
I've talked about this recently with somebody else. Like, there was this movie called Inside Llewyn Davis,
Hmm.
and it just kind of like I really liked how that movie just dropped you into like a day in the life of this guy, and there was real
Yeah.
no like what happened before, what happens after.
Right.
And that's kind of what this reminds me of. Is like we just kind of wake up with this guy and just like
Right.
go through like a shotgun of a day. Like it's just full throttle from beginning to end, and
Right.
you see a lot of interesting things, and I just thought it was really cool in the way that like there's a lot of motion to it, and it's just like a really fun ride.
Yeah. That movie is a Coen Brothers movie, right?
Hmm.
That, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and I remember hearing about that. Yeah, it's I mean, I really just wanted, the mindset that I had going into it was, there are certain words that were in my head, which was I wanted to be hard, I
Hmm.
wanted to be visceral, and I wanted to be fast. That's kind of what I was thinking, and I wanted it to be brutal. I don't, because I understand that the comics medium, yeah, I mean, we live in this, PlayStation 5 just came out. You know,
Hmm.
there's so much media that is such an onslaught on your senses. Even like VR is going to be basically the next thing in terms of,
Yeah.
I think in terms of gaming, that's the next
Hmm.
thing. So,
Oh yeah, there's a really interesting interview with Mark Zuckerberg I watched
oh yeah,
recently where yeah he totally sold me on the idea like VR is going to be the next platform. Like
I
the
mean,
internet is like a platform. VR
right,
would be the next level of that. Like somewhere
yeah.
you would go to get away. I'm like okay, whenever he explained it in Zuckerberg ways,
It's
like I was like okay, I see his vision now. I see what he's saying.
Yeah, it's Ready Player One. I mean,
Hmm.
I feel like once we master the feedback of, like, because that's the only limitation. It's like, I tried VR.
Hmm.
You don't feel things. You don't when you
Yeah.
grab things, but once you get that, that's it. I mean,
Yeah.
it's
That's
it's it's
That's
over.
actually, yeah, that's exactly what he was talking about. Is like,
Right.
I think it was Marquez Brownlee.
Yeah.
He was the one interviewing him, in fact, and that's what he
Uh-huh.
was talking about. Is he's like, well, what about like touch and feedback? And
Right.
Zuckerberg was saying like, well, here's the thing, like we can't recreate that, but if we take what is the effect of that and try to achieve the desired outcome in a different way, then
Right.
yes, and it opens the possibilities because now you're saying you can't see, but it can detect if you're close to something. So now, where if you were looking for something in a box,
Right. Right.
if you couldn't have lights, your lights were out in your house and you couldn't see
Right.
inside, you wouldn't be able to find that specific item. But if
Yeah.
you had VR and you told it, now when you detect this item, like give me pressure sensitivity.
Right.
So
Right.
when you reach in this box in the complete darkness, you'll suddenly start to
You
feel
can
like you
feel
can
it.
feel it. Yeah.
Right.
And you
Right.
don't even have to see it. And he's like, it opens a whole nother level of senses while taking away some others. So we have to reimagine the outcome and target that, not the
Right,
desired process.
right, and that is, I mean, it is kind of crazy, but it's
Mm-hmm.
also kind of like exciting to see what you can do with it. You know, it's kind of like that Pandora's box thing. It's like I
Mm-hmm.
kind of don't want to go there, but at the same time, I gotta see where it's gonna go.
Yeah.
so you know, it's like because I don't know, but it's interesting. But you know, it's the idea of the pushing the technology and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So, but getting back to the comic is I am aware that, and maybe that's kind of the interesting thing about comics for me is you're trying to play this game because
Mm-hmm.
you're using the limitation and you're playing this game of like even when when you draw a page by page thing, you only have so much room on a page to tell a story. So you have to slice it in such a way where you're telling a story, but it doesn't feel claustrophobic. That was a big
Mm-hmm.
thing I think for new artists is like they try to fit too much in, or they draw it in such a way where it feels too cramped or too
Mm-hmm.
condensed. But the whole thing was like I understand this is a comic. I understand this is like at the time it was maybe 2017 or 2016. But it's a medium that is actually not that old in comparison to other stuff. But I am enough of a realist to admit in terms of stimulation of entertainment, it's very limited. I mean, it doesn't move, it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't make noise, it doesn't make sounds. I mean, I know they're going into like it's kind of like I've seen like maybe you've seen it too, animated comics where they'll
Mm-hmm.
kind of like animate the frame. To me, that's kind of weird because it's like, well, I mean, you might as well just animate the thing. I mean, if it's what I
Yeah,
mean. It's like
I'm kind of the same way. Like
right,
I like 2D cartoons and I like 3D cartoons, but something
right,
about that 2D cartoon
yeah,
animation doesn't work. Like it works for
right.
South Park, it works for like Paper Mario, but for some reason the comic thing it doesn't look quite
It
right. I
doesn't.
can't.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't. So to me, but so in that sense, for me, a comic is like, okay, if you're aware of its limitations, then you have to push, you know, in a different way. It's almost like, let's
Mhm.
say I have a kind of martial arts mindset where it's like,
Mhm.
there's a saying that says you never want to box a boxer because you're kind of playing in his realm and you're probably going
Yeah.
to lose. So you want to wrestle him. You want to do it in a different way,
Mhm.
take him out of his game. So I think with comics, it's really okay. It doesn't move, it doesn't make sound, but you can have really personal and intimate kind of writing,
Yeah.
and you can also learn where you want to simplify things, where you want to add detail. You can play with the compositions, which film basically can't do. It's because it's everything is letterbox, but
Mhm.
with comics you can make it tall, you can make
Yeah.
it box, you can make it so you can play with that. And it's really just art. It's just
Mhm.
making the right drawing at the right time, at the right angle, with the right framing. And
Mhm.
it's just you have to make it look good, but then as an added bonus, the writing can pull you in. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
He-
that's how I'm
Uh,
thinking. That's how I think basically.
mhm. Are you reading or are you familiar with Jason Howard's Big Girls?
No, I
No?
I'm gonna write it down just because I always want to look this up. So you said
Yeah,
Jason Howard's Big Girls.
yeah, Jason Howard, Big Girls.
Mm-hmm.
It's a comic that's set in this world where like there's basically like giant girls, so girls grow to be like, stories tall.
Right.
And it's kind of a post-apocalyptic world and stuff, but
Right.
what you were just talking about, whenever they're dealing with the regular humans, they're all like our size and stuff.
Right.
It uses those very like slanted panels, so you get like
Mm-hmm.
the widescreen effect. But
Right.
when they're doing shots of like the big girls and stuff, then they switch to these very like
The
vertical
vertical.
panels.
Right.
And so it delivers the story in two completely different ways depending on who's in the shot. You get a lot of like distant big shots whenever it's both of those character categories working in the same shot.
Right.
And
Right.
it's just like a really interesting way to look at just what you were describing, how in TV or movie they're kind of stuck in this one frame,
Basically.
and they have to
Basically.
pick one if they're going to be on a phone and the other one
Right.
if it's going on a screen. But In
right.
comic books, we get to mess with every panel. You know, every page and every panel is a new layout. You get to choose
Yeah,
what you do.
and it could be different shapes. It doesn't have to
Hmm.
be square. Right? It could be circle. It could be whatever. So that's yeah. I can see that. But is there? I mean, let me ask you this. So you is there a specific kind of artist that you really like or genre of comics that you really look at? Because I like to get a sense of like your taste and stuff like that. Like
Yeah.
your psychology.
Well, for me, I think I prefer art when it matches the story,
Hmm.
or the style of the story.
Right.
I like a lot of very hectic things,
Uh-huh.
kind of like you have going here with the black and white.
Right.
If you like Daniel Warren Johnson, the way it's like real scratchy.
Right.
Jason Howard has a style kind of like that, where it's real scratchy and hectic
Right.
looking. I
Right.
like the way that black and white presents like this. It almost evokes the sense of like chaos being controlled, but just
Right.
barely. You know, like it's breaking
Right.
at the seams. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Um,
you said in terms of like so based on what you're saying, so would you like somebody like a Bill Sienkiewicz or something like that?
who's that?
Bill Sienkiewicz,
Uh,
who did like he did like you remember Elektra, like the solo stuff, or he did some of like the New Mutant stuff, or he did the early Moon Knight.
okay, I think
Except yeah, go ahead.
a lot of like shadows and stuff,
Yeah,
real
and
dark edges.
he's really scratchy. Like his
Yeah,
inking is very very loose and very scratchy, stuff like that. You might maybe I'm assuming that's kind of what you
hmm,
like, but
yeah, that sounds
yeah,
really interesting.
but I'm gonna look at the big girls as I never
Yeah,
heard of that. But
yeah, it's an Image title. It's going on right
Image.
now. Yeah,
Okay. Okay.
yeah,
All
it's a
right.
really cool book. It's got a cool story. But yeah,
Right.
like I said, it does a lot with paneling and like perspective. You know, so I
Yeah.
thought that was really cool.
I'm more of a. To be honest with you, it's because you said this is like the Big Girls is like a book that's going on right now.
Hmm.
I've always been. I've said it before. I've always been, for whatever reason, I like the much older comics work, like
Hmm.
older. You're talking like maybe 50s or 60s.
Yeah,
Early
like
60s,
Golden
50s.
Age, Silver Age,
Yeah,
stuff like that.
and
Yeah.
because even like if you look at like early Superman, like a Simon
Hmm.
Schuster, the drawings are they're kind of crude looking. Even like the
Hmm.
Batman stuff, like very almost like too simple, but there's a sincerity in the drawing because it's like you can tell that the artist, it's about the idea, and they're
Yeah.
just like basically you're pushing through like the limitation of their artistic talent to just try to get this
Hmm.
idea into a physical form. Like, or I look at like a Submariner from Bill Everett, or it's just simple brushwork. Of course they did get better over time, and specifically I would say when the EC horror stuff came out, there was a lot of talented artists at that time. Specifically, I think EC was doing like the best stuff at that time. They had Jack Davis, Johnny Craig, Bernie Krigstein. Lee Ellis is another one. It's like, by the way, like I have another book that I'm planning on completing, and it's my thing that I learned from seeing those guys is that they were very loose with their inking because they had to hit a deadline. So it's like they were not with these little, people use like these little micron and like, I mean, like cross hatching on like, detail
Yeah.
on like a case of cigarettes like in the background. It's just like, and
Hmm.
that's fine. You could like a Jeff Darrow or something,
Yeah.
and that's fine. But there's a boldness and
Hmm.
it just looks heavier and bigger, the older
Yeah.
stuff, and I just really like that. So
Uh
I
huh.
kind of want to do something like that.
Yeah. No, yeah, I know what you mean. There was a lot less lines in it, and so every line meant a little bit more, you know.
Yeah, yeah,
A lot
yeah,
of like line economy and simplistic. Like it's deceptive in how simple those designs are, but to
right.
make them work requires so much like talent and experience
You got to
to
know where to
really
put
pull
them.
it off. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, and so yeah, you got to know where to put them. You got to know where to spot the blacks.
Hmm.
Like where you're gonna, because you could put a whole shadow on one side, but you got to know where to put it, how much to put, and I think that was just a consequence of like that time where it was guys that were cranking out these books because they were
Hmm.
making a lot of money, and it's like, dude, let's just, you learn how to draw faster, you learn how to work more economically because of
Yeah.
that. Nowadays, it's like, I'm gonna give you 2 months to do one book or something. It's just
Yeah.
like, and then you got Jack Kirby doing like 3, 4 books a month, which
Hmm.
is like crazy. Like,
Yeah.
but then again, look at his drawings; they're very stripped down. If you look at the early Fantastic Four stuff, his drawing was much more controlled.
Hmm.
Towards the end of Kirby's career, he kind of went into his own like Kirby isms, where it was not even realistic almost at all. Everything was just so abstract because he's penciling so much. That's the only way you could draw to do all these books, because if you try to
Yeah.
limit yourself to realism, you because you got to slow down for that, and you got to
Hmm.
get the detail, the subtlety. But
Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah, Comic Tropes did some great episodes where he covered a lot of that artwork and stuff.
yeah,
And that's a big element of those days was just inkers, you know?
yeah,
Like
yeah,
we don't think nearly as much about when we list a book now, we're looking at the writers, the line work, the
right,
colors and the letters, you know, but back
right,
then inkers were a huge part of the process, and it was often a pairing. Like you
mm,
found an inker that inked the line, your lines the way you wanted, and you
right.
teamed with them, and you went from job to job to job. You know.
Right, right, right. There's even like a Kirby, like there's a list of inkers that people
Hmm.
like. Let's say there's people, commercially, like most people, they'll say Joe Sinnott was like the guy for Kirby because he's
Hmm.
like, oh, he's like so perfect, and it is. The lines are perfect. But then you look at somebody like, I think Vince Coletta. I like his stuff because he added like texture to it. He kind of
Hmm.
made Kirby's drawings a little bit more. He kind of gave it a bit of a solidity, or you get somebody like the guy who did the early final Fantastic Four issues. I think his name was, I can't remember off the Ross. No, not Ross. Anyway, the early
Yeah.
anchor. I'm trying to remember. Mike Royer is another one, but I don't
Okay.
like his stuff because it's too. It makes he copied Kirby like too precisely to his
Hmm.
pencils, and it kind of made his lines kind of like watery, like it looks like liquidy or something. I don't know.
Oh,
To me,
okay.
Mike Royer was a little bit off,
Yeah.
but yeah, Dick Ayers. That's what I'm talking about. Dick
Oh,
Ayers.
okay.
Look at the early Fantastic Four stuff. He did everything in brush over Kirby, and so his
Wow.
his lines are so heavy, but it works for Kirby.
Hmm.
So you know,
Yeah,
yeah,
it was a collaborative process, you know, and that
yeah,
I think that's what kind of made or break could make or break something is like how in line is this a singular vision, and how in line is this with two creators bringing their own thing to the table. And I
yeah.
feel like that's the element of collaboration, is that it kind of in general creates something a little bit better, you know, because you're each tweaking the other person's ideas, you know.
Yeah, you got to match them up, right? I mean,
Hmm.
like even for myself, I wouldn't mind having an inker, but at the time, all I had was myself. So if I do another project, because I realized doing everything yourself, this was why the book took forever, because I'm literally, I'm lettering, I'm penciling, I'm writing, I'm inking it. That's 4 jobs right there, and I
Hmm.
didn't, and I did one. I penciled the book, not intending to ink it, but to get back to what I was doing when I was kind of showing these pages to professionals
Hmm.
while it was being made. Or again, John Paul Leon looked at the pages, and he was the one that made the suggestion. Well, I think you should ink it because I mean that's kind of what you do. You can't just like pencil a book and then you just leave it like that. You kind of gotta take it all the way, or as far as you
Yeah.
can take it. So that's why I was like, I didn't want to ink it because that's why it's so heavily detailed. But so now I gotta go over it again. So it's like you're
Hmm.
drawing pages twice. So but I did it. I had to. I had no. I had no choice. Now,
Yeah.
in retrospect, if I could find an inker who I feel kind of understands my drawing and we match well, yeah, sure,
Hmm.
I'll get an inker, and then because it will speed up the. It's more reasonable.
Yeah.
But if I'm inking it, I gotta simplify it because it's just too
Hmm.
much for
Yeah.
one guy. It take
Yeah.
forever. Yeah.
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 Yeah, that's why we split the jobs up anyway, you know, is because
Right.
it's a lot to put out a whole like 28 pages for one person, that's a minimum of 4 passes.
Yeah,
That's
yeah, and so that's why I mean, if I do that again, I have to modify because the way wall breakers, there's no,
hmm
it would take too long. So would have to modify. I would have to find a
yeah.
way to strip it down a little bit, but make it still
hmm
work. So, but that's it.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a famous quote by I don't know, one of those famous painters where he basically describes that like your whole life or whatever, your whole pursuit of art is to learn how to do everything so you can
Right,
take away as much as possible and reveal a good product.
right, right. Yeah,
And that's
right,
kind of the magic to the process, is finding that perfect tipping point of like, this is speed, this is
right,
quality that I'm okay with,
right.
and where is that
Mm-hmm.
balance? How much time do I need to spend to get something I'm okay with putting out?
That's exactly what you said. That's a huge part of comics, and that's a personal thing where you just have to experiment, and everybody has their personal tendencies. Like me for example, I'm actually not a very patient person. I like things to go as smoothly as possible. That's what I learned with this book. I learned how impatient I really was.
hmm
So even now, like when I draw now, it's, if I don't like those first few lines, I just throw it away because I'm not gonna try to force it to work. If it's not
Yeah,
working at an early stage, I'm just not gonna force it
yeah,
because I went through that. So that's why I draw. If you see my drawing, it's so simple. But if I
hmm
see that it looks good, even when it's like really simple, then I go with it. If it
yeah,
doesn't work, just throw it away. Just do something else because I
yeah,
need the energy. I need it to pull
hmm
me in. So
yeah.
you know,
Yeah, I feel you on that, man. I'm the same way. Like whenever I'm pursuing something, like
right,
I envision the way that it should all go, and if it's
right,
not going that way, it
right,
annoys me almost more than if the result turns out okay.
right,
And it's like
right.
those very opening moments of something is like determines completely how I feel going into it.
Right. So when you start drawing, do you use any particular? Do you use like a regular pencil or blue line or
Well,
what?
yeah, well, I'm not an artist, so I don't really draw, but I
Okay.
mean, even just like any kind of creative pursuit,
Right.
I mess around in like web design and stuff and digital
Ah.
design, and
Right.
if it doesn't feel right from the very first step, then it
Right.
drives me crazy.
Right.
If I'm
Yeah.
writing something and I can't like get an opening sentence that feels right,
Uh
then
huh.
I feel like the rest of it's worthless,
Right.
and
Yeah. You can
you,
you can sense it. It's like, no,
yeah,
this is not working. But at
yeah,
least you
yeah,
have but at least you have that awareness. Maybe in
hmm
the past, maybe you try, because I know I did. I would try to force something, but now I realize you waste so much time trying to mold something, and if at first it's, you just don't see it there.
hmm
Now, as I'm older, it's like, okay, just let it go. It's not working. Do
yeah.
something else. Yeah. So
Yeah, well, I mean, I think part of aging and wisdom and stuff with that is
right.
just like understanding like when this isn't working because it's a bad idea, and
Mm-hmm.
understanding when this isn't working because something's not quite right,
Right.
and being
Right.
able to like fine tune that and get to it,
Right.
or no, like this is worthless. Like this isn't working because it won't work. So like, don't waste my time.
Yeah, you feel it, you sense it,
hmm
for sure,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah, I
Um,
think it's like a sixth sense that creative types have about whatever they're doing.
yeah, I think, and it's great. But let me ask: Are you? I always like to ask this question. Are you
hmm
do you watch a lot of movies? You a big movie guy?
Uh, I mean, admittedly, the last couple of years I've mostly been invested in comics, but
Right,
a lot of that just comes from movies and TV. And
right,
honestly, I'm kind of starting to realize in some ways I think I was getting a little bored with the format.
right. With the
Like you
film,
were, yeah, like you were
yeah,
talking about with comics, like
you're right.
there's just so much more involved as the reader that really
Mm-hmm.
interests me. Whereas I almost feel bored whenever I sit down to watch almost anything now because it's such a passive experience, even if you
Right.
are like trying to engage.
Right, right. And it's funny that you say that because there was a time where I would watch every kind of movie, foreign films,
hmm
black and white, older, from the 40s, 50s, 60s, maybe even 30s sometimes, silent films. I watched all kinds of whatever, animation. And so there was a lot of years I spent looking at the films. Nowadays, because I looked at film so much, it's difficult for me to just sit down and enjoy it because I can notice, okay, the writing isn't working here.
Hmm.
There's something, the dialogue is not working here or whatever. So I'm super critical when it comes to film. So I can't just like watch something and have no
Yeah.
opinion. I just not for me.
Yeah, I'm the same
Um,
way. Yeah, it's a
right.
big problem.
Right. So, but I do, I always like to hear people's feedback, even if it's just
Hmm.
for comics, because I like criticism. I like critiques. I think that's the fun part. I don't think
Hmm.
there's enough of that really, because that's how
Yeah.
you kind of you get a sense of like the kind of overall opinion of the work.
Hmm.
So I love that. I used to love to watch movies with people that were like, what do they call them, movie buffs, and then I would
Oh
watch it
yeah.
with like an average person, and you would see what scenes worked universally, what
Hmm.
scenes only worked for the aficionados, what
Yeah.
scenes were like maybe went over the average
Hmm.
viewer who's not into movies. So you get a feel for it and you go, okay, if you do something, you write something, you can sense what's going to work in a universal level. But
Yeah.
yeah, so
No, yeah, I agree with you completely on like constructive criticism.
yeah.
I went to art school
Hmm.
briefly, and
Okay, how
the
was
the
that like,
two
by the way? Did you like it?
art school, I
Be
thought it
honest.
was well. It's one of those things. Like, okay, here's what college is really about.
Yeah,
It
tell me. Yeah.
You kind of break away and you get to learn to grow up a little bit, and be on your own with a little bit of a safety net. But what college really teaches you is how to learn. So
Uh,
then in later pursuits, you know how to continue to grow.
mm,
You're not
mm,
there learning information that you need. You're there learning how to learn information because
uh,
especially if you're working in like technology or something these days, it's moving so fast. They can't
yeah.
teach you what you need to know. They need to teach you how to learn so you can
Right.
continue to stay up to date.
Mm, mm,
But the other thing I took away from art school was like constructive criticism. They
right.
would say, okay, you need to draw a perspective drawing. And whenever you come back to class next week, the first thing we would do is we would put them all on the board. And like anybody could be like, I'll go and just like go up there and critique anybody's
Right.
painting that was on the
Yeah.
wall. And it was the teacher's only rule. Like you could get as dirty as you wanted with it. The teacher's only rule was
Right.
it has to be constructive. You can't just
Right.
be there to tear down.
Right.
You
Right.
cannot just get rid of something. You have to replace it with something better. And
Right.
to me,
Right.
that's what we're missing. Like
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
in
I
like
agree.
journalism in general is like we're
Yes.
never like comics journalism. They're either saying like this is good, go read it, or wait
Or
until
this.
it's out in a trade, or like this
Right.
is no good. But
Right.
what they need to be saying is like it works here and here, but this doesn't
Right.
work, and this
Be
is what I would do to
specific.
improve it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Be specific. That. Yeah. I agree with you 100%. It's like that's really. Like I always say, you can love something or you can hate it, and that's fine. But you need to. I would like if you could explain why. That's the important part. The
Yeah.
why. Why? Tell me. Show me. So I understand you, so I can understand. And you're right. Maybe I think personally, maybe it's because a lot of the you mentioned comics journalism. A lot of those people maybe perhaps don't actually have an understanding of like the basic things of comics, like
Mhm.
visual storytelling, composition, you know, the flow of the panels, economy of panels.
Mhm.
That's something that not a lot of people actually know unless you're like doing comics and you're really good at it,
Mhm.
or you have that mindset you can see. But some people, they review comics and all they know about comics is like they can tell you, a certain writer they like or art style they
Mhm.
like. That's pretty much it. But it's not even really about the art itself.
Mhm.
It's just how do you tell the story? Is this working?
Yeah.
Um, so there's not enough of that. I agree. It's too vague. It's like, okay, why
Mhm.
is this good? I need to know.
Yeah. See, yeah, and that's my favorite word is why.
Right.
Because I can read a comic and go, "Okay, I didn't like that." And
But
that
you
could
could
be the end
say,
of it. But
right,
instead I say, "Well, why didn't I like it?"
right,
Well, it was, and you start to think and you're like, "Okay, it was really
mm,
fun here, but this is where it kind of lost me. So let me look at that." Now, why
right,
did I not like this section? And you're like, "Okay,
right,
the action is kind of weird here. Why is it weird?" And you
right,
start looking and the more times you ask why, the
right.
more concrete of an answer and a definition
Yes,
you're going to find.
right.
And I hate whenever I interact with people that say like, "Oh, well, you're overthinking it," or like,
Right. I got that
I
too.
don't
Yeah.
think like that, and I'm like,
Yeah.
but
Oh,
it's
you
not
think too
really.
much. You're thinking too much. Yeah.
Yeah. And to me, it's like, why would you stop asking why before you know the answer?
Right.
Like, I want to know
Yeah.
why this action scene didn't work. I want to know why this
Yeah.
dialogue doesn't work. Why,
Right.
why does it feel this way? Why does it act like that?
Yeah. We
I feel like
need
all you have
that.
to do is say why.
Yeah, we need that. And if that person cannot articulate, I mean,
Hmm.
it's hard for me to take that opinion because okay, you just said oh, you don't like it, but if you can't tell me why, I mean, what's the point? I
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. I
it's
mean,
like
I go through this all the time with like my kids, we'll watch a
oh,
movie or
okay,
we'll go to the theater,
that's kind of fun. That's kind of fun.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And they hate it because we'll go to a movie and we're coming out and I'm like, "So what did y'all think?" They're like,
Right.
"Oh, it was good." I'm like, "Well,
Okay.
why was it good? What did you
Why?
like about it?"
Right.
And the whole trip home, I'll have them breaking down the movie, and
Right.
that's what I try to stress to people is like, you don't have to know the industry terms. When I'm talking to you about a movie, you don't have to know that this is a panning shot or whatever.
You're right.
You don't
Right.
have to be at that level, but you should be able to break something down enough to where you understand why or why you don't like it.
Yeah. It's critical thinking,
Hmm.
That's what
There
it's
you go.
about.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like you see critical thinking and
Hmm.
yeah, I just love that. But again, I don't hear enough of that. Even if I go to like and I haven't gone to a comic shop, but I will go to comic shops and occasionally like I'll overhear a conversation and I'll
Hmm.
ask questions and stuff like that. And generic answers don't help. I mean, you like this Spider-Man issue because I don't know. It's you like the artist, okay, and is that it? I mean,
Yeah.
so but that's good. I'm glad that you do that with your kids. You're
Hmm.
kind of like teaching them to articulate, which is
Oh
great.
yeah, yeah. I believe they should very much be able to think critically. Because I know people see it as like a goofy hobby or just entertainment, but if you can think critically about a movie or a comic, then
You're right. That
what's to stop
applies.
you from thinking about anything?
Yeah, that's what it applies. But so you say you've been into comics more so
Hmm.
instead of like films like that. So is it mostly like a specific genre that you like to engage in?
Well, see, that gets tough because it's ever growing, and
Yes.
for me, especially the last couple of years, I've really gotten into kind of like the, I guess, like abstract
Mm-hmm.
concepts and stuff. And so really right now, anything that, I don't know, kind of like ask questions about the world and about the meaning of all this, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
There's this genre I've kind of started just kind of dubbing like optimistic sci-fi.
You're
And it
right.
almost seems like there's a lot of people writing stories that take place just after the apocalypse.
Right.
And
Right.
so like humanity is rebuilding for some reason, and a lot of times they know about the technology of the past and
Right.
how that went bad. And so
Right.
as they're rebuilding civilization, they're thinking about how to get away from those problems or stop those problems from happening.
Right.
And
Right.
so that's kind of what has my attention right now is a lot of stuff that's just like thinking more abstract about the world that we live in and what the
Mm-hmm.
future is for all of this.
Right. Okay. So that's kind of like the thing. So, is there? So you would say that the writing is what pulls you in more so than the art and stuff like that.
I would say if it came to when I look at a comic book, I
Yeah.
think the writing is a little more important to me than the artwork,
Mm-hmm.
but really it's a package, and the storytelling is what hooks me. And
Right.
because you can do, I don't know, like Firepower right now with Kirkman. That's
Uh-huh.
and Chris Samney. Like they're
Right.
both
Right.
really good at what they're doing, but
Right.
there's like an issue. The second issue is like almost silent. And there's
Right.
just something in the way all the panels and everything, the action flows.
Right.
So anything, I don't know. To me, it's the overall package. How does the art match the story and bring the best elements out of both sides?
Yeah. I agree. I mean, I think this is the kind of the way I see it is, and that's kind of what I learned like doing the book, the Wallbreakers book, is that, and hopefully with the next book I do, I'm gonna, me personally, it's like, okay, yes, art is great and art is important. It's a visual thing,
Hmm.
um, but the writing, you can really put a sense of intimacy in the book, of personality, and that's kind of, I feel nowadays, at least for me, it's like that's really important, the writing. I mean, the
Mm-hmm.
art is important, but that writing, I mean, you can elevate something from just, I like the way this looks, this is a beautiful piece of art, to
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna remember these words. These words, they're kind of touching something, if done correctly. They're kind of like,
Yeah.
they're speaking truth, which is why you want to keep reading it, because you feel this is true. Whatever I'm reading, it feels true to me,
Mm-hmm.
and so I'm connecting there. So that's kind of you're right. It's the whole package, of course. But
Yeah.
I really feel like that writing is kind of like
Mm-hmm.
the soul of the thing.
Yeah.
You really got to have that,
Yeah. I often think of the writing as like the character and personality,
Yeah.
and the pacing and the mood comes from the art, and how you
Right.
marry those two elements
Right.
kind of controls how you tell your story, because like this is 28 pages, and I mean it just like breezes
It's so
through
fast,
because yeah,
yeah.
like it's a real quick read, but like not in a bad way, like
Right, right,
totally in the sense of like somebody was clearly creating like an action driven book, and like
right.
like I mean the first John Wick movie, nobody
Yeah,
would say that was a bad movie, but that was a tight 90 minutes, and it
it
felt
was
like I was
tight.
in that seat for like 10 minutes.
Right, right, right. Yeah,
Like they
you.
knew how to move through it, and I think it's a
Yeah.
good thing to have some brevity and understand the story you're trying to tell, and
Mhm.
telling that story and staying within the scope of what it needs to be to get there.
Yeah, yeah, I learned that even like, in writing. I mean, they would be a lots of dialogue, and I go, okay, can we make this smaller? Because it's like I can sense it when I'm kind of going off too long, and you're kind of overstaying your welcome, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So I can sense that. So, so hopefully with the next one, like when I write something, it's important to know what words to use, when to use it,
Mm-hmm.
and how long you should kind of hold the reader to read, and when you're kind of meandering. Like I don't like that when you're sort of meandering.
Yeah.
So but yeah, that's kind of how I'm taking it. But let me ask you this other thing too, because I know, the
Mm-hmm.
comic books thing is, I don't know if you've heard, but I've heard these things about like these floppies might be going away, and I don't know how you feel about that, but there's something about, I don't know about you, but floppies, I think I have a sort of, I like floppies. I grew up, buying those floppies.
Mm-hmm.
I think the prices are too high, for the average floppy. And there was a comic book store that I bumped into the other day in Brooklyn, where the store emphasized mostly selling like trade paperbacks
Mm-hmm.
and graphic novels. Mostly, yes, there was a section for floppies, but the bulk of what they were selling was merchandise, T-shirt, posters, all that kinds of
Mm-hmm.
toys, and then the trade paperbacks and the graphic novels, and then like floppies on the side. So I think
Yeah.
maybe what do you think? You think that's like the future? Like not so much the floppies, more so trades and stuff like that.
A big part of what you're seeing right now
Yeah,
is the impact of COVID. When everything's shut down, and getting people to go into stores right now is very difficult, and
yeah,
that's the primary selling format of a floppy, is walking into that store every Wednesday and buying it.
right.
Um, but there is a larger movement in that direction overall. I
Mm-hmm.
don't think that floppies are going to go away completely.
Mm-hmm.
You're always going to have DC and Marvel telling these very like 20-page stories, these very like episodic style stories.
Yeah.
Even whenever they do runs right now of like Batman, and this story is like six issue story arc, it's still
Mm-hmm.
like kind of is written in a way to kind of cap it so that every week still feels episodic.
Right.
You might see a big drop off in some of the small press and indie press stuff like
Mm-hmm.
Image and Aftershock or
Right.
IDW Boom. I could imagine them dropping a lot of their floppy titles.
Mm-hmm.
But even if you look at like how some of these other like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles at IDW,
Yeah.
100% written for the trade. Like every four
Right.
issues is a story arc.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a common thing you're seeing in a lot of stuff, is they're writing specifically for all the people that are going to buy this 4 issues at a time in a collected book.
Right. Right.
And then you have these like titans of industry like Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips, they've went
Yeah.
to this like almost like novella graphic novel style, like
Mm.
80 to 120 pages.
Uh-huh.
And these, I think we're going to see a big rise in those because they kind of went straight to it. They do like a hardback, very beautiful, very nice done edition. It's like
Yeah.
86 pages or something. It's
Right.
a great story, open, close. That's
Right.
it, you know.
Right.
And as soon as that hit like sales records, I was like, okay, yeah, that's a
Right.
thing. And
That's a thing, yeah.
yeah, so you see them already planning out like we're going to do 4 to 6 of these a year, you know,
Right. Right.
and that way they don't have to worry about the month to month selling the
Right.
floppy copy and all that, you know.
Right. Right.
So I do think we're going to see a shift, but I think a lot of your like classic fans are always going to be there, and DC and Marvel is definitely always going to cater to that.
Sure. Yeah, I'm always curious about that because, I look at some of, when I go to a comic book shop, they have, it's amazing. I look at the youth, like I look at what they're doing. I have a cousin who's really into comics, and he buys for $10 these little kind of thick little black and white books, mangas, and
Mm-hmm.
there's mangas about everything. $10, black and white newsprint, and he likes to spend money on these little books, because it's
Mm-hmm.
like kind of a lot of content for a reasonable price, and I kind of dig it. Except I'm not like a kind of a manga guy, but I
Mm-hmm.
appreciate that format because obviously
Mm-hmm.
it sells. Or I'm more so nowadays. I'm not really into floppy, so if a book is coming out, I'll maybe pick one issue. If I like it, I'll wait for it to be collected because I want the
Mm-hmm.
whole thing in one shot, and that makes
Yeah.
sense to me. 25, $30 for a collected thing,
Mm-hmm.
that kind of makes sense. But at the same time, even like my with the digital thing, Wall Breakers is digital, and I
Mm-hmm.
remember like seeing. I mean, my cousin, he'll read a comic book on his phone, and I'm just like, how could you read a comic on your phone? But it's like they're fine with it, like
Mm-hmm.
they're just fine with it. But I'm looking at like, but you can't even really enjoy the art. It's so small, but they're fine with it. So I know that at some point we're gonna find the new
Mm-hmm.
way. I think digital kind of is the way at some point.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when we master it at some point, we're gonna figure it out. But I think that's the way. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, as far as like manga, like
yeah,
that is, I'm not gonna call it a problem because like I'm,
yeah,
yeah, well, like I'm like you, right? Like I
yeah,
understand the medium, I respect
right,
the medium. I have a
yeah,
12-year-old son that is like obsessed with it. You know, he's buying the
right,
same stuff.
right,
Um, you know, but my one issue, not issue with it, but my issue with American comics right now
yeah,
is the fact that like my son was dyslexic
uh,
and he struggled forever to learn to read, and then I got him into comic books and he started learning to read and he wanted to
right,
read and he got better at reading,
right,
and then he found manga. And I was like, okay, so that's just like
right,
his thing, right? So
right,
then my 8-year-old, same thing. Like she's struggling to read. She gets
right,
diagnosed with dyslexia. I use comic books to get her to learn, and
right,
boom, manga. I'm like,
right,
what the heck is going on? And
right,
this is the discussion I've been having with people is
right,
what is manga doing? Because it has become, comic books have become a gateway to it.
right,
That's essentially what American comics have become, is a
right.
gateway to get you
To
into
to
manga.
manga, right,
And
right,
so that's
and
kind of my beef right now with like American comic books is like, how
right.
are you not getting the kids, but they are, you know?
That's a you know what you make a fascinating point, and I'm gonna say that I could just tell you what I think is because the American comics really, I think American comics kind of hit a crescendo. The heights,
Mm-hmm.
I think, were back in the 80s, when they had like these Dark Knight Returns and Watchmen, and they were kind of doing things at that time. They were kind of pushing the envelope. Ever since Watchmen, everybody wants to be Watchmen. Everybody
Mm-hmm.
wants to be Alan Moore, and it's almost like, why can't you just be fun? Not everything has to be dark, and for adults. It doesn't have to
Yeah.
be that way. And at the same time, I think there's too much of an emphasis on, you got to know the history. You got to know what happened in the
Mm-hmm.
past to kind of understand it. And as far as I know, mangas are kind of self-contained. I mean, you can kind of jump
Hmm.
in for the most part. I don't know. And also, I just think it's the price point. I think it's the even the size of it. I think kids just like that smaller kind of thing
Yeah.
that they can kind of hold, and it
Hmm.
has a durability because floppy. I mean, it's gonna get destroyed. You kind of got to
Hmm.
be prissy with it, but these mangas are pretty thick. You can kind of throw them in your bag and trade
Yeah.
them and stuff like that. So I think American comics, so many talented people, but they're stuck on the Alan Moore thing. Like we all want to be the next.
Yeah.
That happened and that was fine, but you got to kind of loosen up. I think indie
Hmm.
comics there is a way to that because
Yeah.
you don't have history to keep holding on to.
Yeah.
Anyway, you let me
I think
know, but
that's why you've seen such an explosion in indie comics is because I've even heard like some, I guess, like indie comic creators, but
yeah,
high profile indie comic creators, and they didn't read comics growing up because they weren't into superheroes,
right,
and that's something I've been saying for a while. Like, it's unfortunate
right,
that the face of the industry is superheroes, because I think there's a huge audience that is missing out because they assume that comic books are all about superheroes.
right, right,
And then I
right.
hear these creators and they're like, I didn't grow up on comics because I didn't like
The
superheroes. And then it wasn't
superheroes,
until somebody gave me an indie comic and I realized that comics are everything. They're not just about superheroes. And I
right,
think that's an image, that we need to break. We need to change. We need to be able to let people know, like, if you like Stranger Things or
right,
whatever Amazon's
right,
doing or whatever, like all of
right,
these things exist in comics too,
right,
and it's
right.
not just like a bunch of guys with capes and tights.
Right. You're absolutely right. I even me actually growing up, it's like
Hmm.
I got into the Spider. Well, I love the TV show. I used to grow up watching the Spider-Man animated show on Fox, and that
Yeah.
kind of was Spider-Man became the guy for me. That was like even to
Hmm.
this day, if I think of my favorite superhero, that's the guy for me.
Yeah, like
But
the '90s cartoon that everybody complains about. I
right.
grew
Oh,
up on that. I
I thought
loved
it
it.
was. I loved it. I thought it
Yeah.
was, and it
Every
introduced me
time I
to
bring
that.
it up, people are like, "Oh yeah, but that show was terrible. Like the continuity was all broken and stuff." I'm like, "Dude, I was like 6, and it was not
Yeah,
broken for me."
no,
Like,
it was fun and
yeah.
everything, and I love
Hmm.
I mean, you can't knock
That theme
the
song.
theme song. Yeah, you cannot. Right, you can't knock it. I'm sorry. They
Yeah.
never made it anything better, but I think that the I think superhero comics can work, but the problem is I think you gotta kind of allow it to be what it is. Again, it's the
Hmm.
Watchmen thing. It's like, why are you
Yeah.
taking superhero comics essentially, I think, are supposed to be kind of like morality tales, where you kind of have to have somebody who is into morality to write a comic book story, and it's supposed to be fun, lighthearted. Yes, you can have the
Hmm.
occasional drama, but it should not be a bunch of superheroes, drug addicts, and killing each other, and because that's not what it was designed to do. It's like
Yeah.
you're asking a car to fly. I mean, it's not designed for that. Superheroes
Yeah.
are morality tales, so you got to go back to that, but do it in a way that it doesn't have to be for mature audiences. It should be
Hmm.
for everybody. But you're right, like
Yeah.
you can have comics about everything else. I just think that I don't know what it is. It's like everybody wants to take these superheroes and have them do things that they were not designed to do based off of, oh, Alan Moore did it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that was supposed to be a one and done, and
Hmm.
that's it. You're not supposed to keep.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well,
So
we'll see. And my thing is, like, a lot of people look at like the '90s with the launch of Image
the
and
image,
people,
yeah,
all of that stuff.
which is
They're like that.
crazy, by the way. That was like over the top.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah. And people are
it was
like, that
wild.
was the height of comics, and
Right.
I kind of reject that. I disagree with that.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that where everybody says like the '80s with Watchmen and all of that was kind of like,
Uh,
that was the turning point. To me, that
right.
was the peak. We had went so far
That
in creating comics that now we were deconstructing the people
that's
we
what
had
it
created in
was.
comics.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was the end of it. And then there was like this last minute cash grab at the end
Right, with the
with the
'90s
Image
stuff.
launch, and
Right.
that's where they were
Right.
just selling for no reason.
Whatever. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think people have that mistake of thinking like we need to get back to that because that's when they were most popular. But that was the liquidation right there.
Right,
To me,
right,
like everything leading up to the '80s is kind of like what really gave comics the heart and the backbone.
right,
And I
right,
think there is like a place to still do like Watchmen style deconstruction and all of that.
right,
But I think people are so busy looking at that and trying to figure out how to create the old comics from that instead of
right,
going back to the old comics and creating new ones. And I think
right,
it's like this really backwards way of looking at it. Like,
it,
go back to the source material and get it.
right.
Don't go through the altered version of the source material to
That's
try
the
to
thing.
repurify it.
Right. That's what I'm saying. It's like that's why, yes, those early comics were very simplistic in their writing and stuff like that. But we have to look at, well, yes, if we look at it purely economically, yes, those books were at the beginning, they were just made to sell to kids.
Hmm.
This is a visual, it's a simple story, whatever. And then, like you said, it progressed into the 70s, into the 80s. It hit its crescendo. It pushed it so far. Then at the 90s, it wasn't even about quality anymore. It was just like, let's just sell it out and that's it. But then
It became
people,
more about the people making the book than the book
right,
they were
as
making.
opposed to the book, right.
Yeah.
And but I think, like, it could still work, but again, it depends on who is making the books. And I think you can get a sense of the psychology of the writer or the artist just looking at the work, reading the work. And I feel nobody's interested really, because most people, let's say you're a new reader, you're a kid is not going to understand a deconstruction of superheroes,
Yeah.
and they're gonna find it boring and bland, and it's not fun, it's not funny.
Well, yeah, they don't know what a superhero is, so you're
They don't,
deconstructing, and they're like, I don't even know what you're breaking
something
down.
that they don't even know. Yeah,
Yeah.
so that's why they're like, I'm gonna go read this manga because this is fun. I understand this is funny, it's fun, I like the art, it's light for the most part. So that's why. But you're giving a kid like these comics, and it's like, oh, Iron Man has a drug, alcohol problem. He's just like, I want to read this, like, you know. So
Yeah.
I
Well,
think
and I
that's what
think
it
they
is.
forget perspective too. Like there is something interesting about Iron Man
Right,
being a hero to a little kid who has like an alcoholic father.
right,
There's something interesting there, but they don't give that kind of perspective. It's still hero worship even though he's an alcoholic, instead of saying
right,
like, look how, your alcoholic father is, being translated
right.
into this medium. Like they forget to perspective shift it. And I don't think it works at that level
Yeah,
if it's adults looking at another adult alcoholic.
right. If it's an adult, right, looking at
Hmm.
at the book, but that's why to me, like, Spider-Man. If I think of why I like, let's say, a character like Spider-Man, to me, I like the. To me, that's one of the best characters, just because the whole drive of that character is all about. This is a young kid who was bitten by a spider. Now he has these amazing powers. What's the first thing he's gonna do? Selfish tendencies. I want to be on
Hmm.
TV. I want to make money. This and that. He's starting
I'm
to
gonna go beat up all my
care.
bullies.
Yeah. He's gonna care less about you know friends. It's all about him now. And then
Hmm.
suddenly he comes across a robber. He had the opportunity to, because he had the power to stop this thief. He let him go. Then he finds out that same thief killed his uncle Ben. He's responsible for the death of his uncle Ben. That
Hmm.
once he realizes that, he's no longer a boy. He matures
Hmm.
now into manhood. So now that's morality. So even throughout this entire course of the character, how many times has Peter failed? He's lost. His relationships destroyed. Not very good with money. He's wanted to give up several times being Spider-Man, but it's that he knows, if I become selfish again, I'm going to do more damage. I should just take the pain and the suffering and keep doing what I'm doing, because I know this is the right thing. Because the last time I was selfish, Uncle Ben died. What's going to happen next time? That's
Hmm.
kind of the beauty of that character. It's not about all these other iterations of Spider-Man that I'm seeing, especially from Disney, where it's all about the suit and 100 different web shooters. That's not
Hmm.
Spider-Man. It's, you got to get
Yeah.
that character.
Well,
So
it's
if you can
not
tell stories
it's
like
not
that,
virtuous.
yeah, right, right. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, like I think that's the thing that makes Spider-Man stick so well, with people in general, but especially kids. I think Spider-Man sticks immediately because when you see the Boy Scout Superman like come in and save the day, you're like, well, of course he was going to. He's always going to do the right thing. But Spider-Man is set
Right.
up from the very beginning as this guy that's having to consciously make the decision to do the right thing. And I think as a
Right.
kid, you look at it and go, well, I can't be like the guy that was going to make the right choice no matter what. But when you see
Right.
Spider-Man, you're like, I can be Spider-Man because I know he made the decision to do the right thing this time. Like you
Right.
always see how much it tortures him to leave Mary Jane, even though Mary Jane doesn't
Right.
understand the other side of it, you know?
Right.
And to
Right.
see him make the choice to leave Mary Jane at the fair while he goes and saves the city, you know, like that's a
Right.
thing people
Right.
relate to because we have to make tough decisions, and sometimes
Right.
it just feels like these characters, you know, especially like Superman, that just like he's going to make the right decision, you know, like it's not even a decision at this point. You know, he's set on that.
Yeah, and I always like Peter's internal dialogue. That was a big part of the books. Always
Mhm,
him thinking about. That's what I love about the book. Always thinking, always thinking.
mhm.
Superman, I don't know. I find it. He's just so overpowering that it's always been difficult for me to get into him. And maybe there are writers that can pull it off, but I mean, when you're Superman, it's like I don't know. I don't know. I don't know how
Yeah.
to write that
Oh
guy. I
yeah,
don't know.
Superman the movie. Like I've always hated Superman. I cannot stand him. I think he's a terrible character.
Yeah.
But I finally watched
A
Superman the
lot of
movie.
people are like, "How could you say that? How could you say
Oh yeah, trust me. um,
that?"
Superman the movie to me is Superman. Like there's nothing
Yeah.
pretentious about him. There's nothing presumptive about him. He's literally
Right.
just doing what he thinks is right in the world. And
Right.
everything outside of that to me has never hit like the way that they just like when people describe Superman and what they like about him, I totally see that in like Superman the movie. I don't see it
Yeah.
anywhere else, you know. I
Right.
think
Right.
the most interesting aspect of him is being like this alien in our world and like the only thing that he wants is to be human, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how you express that in a way that connects with people, and I don't think anybody else
Yeah.
does either. Ironically,
Right.
I think Zack Schneider got the closest whenever he had to snap Zod's neck, you know,
Oh my
and
god.
even
Yeah.
that just doesn't quite feel good, you know. So I don't know what
Right.
the answer is for Superman. I think he's just a bad character, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I think well, he just became so overpowered,
Hmm.
and also I think maybe with a character like him, the interest has to come with surrounding cast because essentially he's just he was raised by perfect parents, basically. I mean, he has such a moral compass. He has this
Hmm.
amazing abilities and powers. So the interest has to come from the other characters that surround him. I think that's where the writing can work.
Hmm.
Lois Lane, Lex, because those are very human characters, as opposed to Superman, who's kind of like so good, he's almost inhuman. How good he is. I
Hmm.
mean, he's just such
Yeah.
a morally righteous person. Or even like I would even say Batman is more interesting because Batman is a crazy person.
Hmm.
He
Yeah.
he is nuts, and that's what makes him more interesting. He's a
Yeah.
nutcase essentially.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I mean, there's just nothing interesting about Superman's choice to go into a fight when you know he can't possibly die, you know?
basically.
His decision to go into battle is not interesting, you know?
Right, right. I mean, yeah, he's borderline a god essentially. So
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah. And then, you know, like you said, Batman, like, he's a crazy person, but like he's a
yeah.
crazy person with a mission, you know? And that's
Right,
what makes him interesting. Like he's still flawed
right,
because he's still a human, you know?
right, right.
Uh, I don't know. That's something that these characters have to have.
Yeah, you gotta. I mean, even with like I said with the Batman, it's like you know, here's a guy who has never gone over his trauma. Essentially, never. I mean, he's still
Hmm.
rethinking the murder of his parents, and he kind of has this weird like mindset about himself where he's like instead of like basically using his funding to like finance Gotham police and just make them like I guess a stronger force and he could just sit back and watch it happen. He's like, no, I gotta do this. I have to take care of Gotham. Maybe because he's paranoid and he understands that people will not do the right thing, so he
Hmm.
himself, he's like, I gotta invest all this money on my suit and my car and this and that. And he is he's wealthy, he's good looking, he's got power, he has influence,
Yeah.
but he goes out at night, puts on this ridiculous outfit, and he punishes criminals to the probably to almost to the brink of death because he
Mm-hmm.
hates evil and criminal, and yet he himself is kind of he's not a very good person. He has his own little twisted sense of virtue because
Mm-hmm.
he wants to take the law into his own hands. So
Yeah.
it's that, but that's an interesting character because there's a
Mm-hmm.
lot to work with there. You
Yeah.
can't get that with
Yeah.
Superman, I don't think.
Oh no. Yeah. Yeah. Like I don't even. You look. This is how like different they are. Is like you can look at Batman and be like, well, he's clearly got OCD and
Right.
borderline personality disorder, and probably
Yeah.
some narcissism since he thinks he's the only
Yes.
person that can solve the problem.
Right. Right.
What is
Right.
Superman like? What are these mental disorders that Superman has? Like none.
None.
Because he's
None.
just not
None. He's
human.
perfect.
Yeah, that's unrelatable.
Right. Right. So
Like
but
Batman is
yeah.
just a crazy
But I mean,
person with a suit and a lot of money.
right. Right. And so and it's funny because he's coming after these criminals, but I'm like, dude, you're no better. I mean, the only difference is, I mean, you don't like kill. That's like, see, that's like the line. Okay, I don't kill. So that's the only thing that separates you from all these other people. You are
Hmm.
just as crazy. It's a bunch of crazy people basically in the Batman
Yeah.
world. So that's kind of
Hmm.
interesting. That's kind of interesting. You can have a lot of fun with that. So I don't
Yeah.
know, but
Although I will give credit to, I think it was Zack Snyder's Batman versus Superman. Whenever he
mhm.
shows like he doesn't kill, but them being branded with the Batman symbol is basically a death sentence
you
once you
know,
get to prison. Like
I didn't
that to me
understand
is
the
kind of an
branding
interesting
thing.
element. Yeah,
Yeah, I
because
mean, I
he was beating up
right,
criminals and he was branding them. But if you were
right,
branded, that means you were tortured by Batman and you gave up
right.
information.
Oh,
And
right,
so that's
right,
kind of
right, right,
whenever the cops take you to prison, well, he's a snitch. He told Batman something in order to get out of having more brands.
right, right. They
But I
they
think
did
that is an interesting
something.
concept.
There is, yeah. They did. I remember when I saw Batman vs Superman. There were parts where I felt the Ben Affleck, he has the look. Like if I think of what would
Hmm.
Batman look like, he
Oh
looks
yeah,
like him. Like I mean, like from the
like
comic. And I
yeah.
was watching it and I said, that's what he would look like. And even
Hmm.
the gothic elements. I think he had like a dream sequence with it was very gothic. I said, wow, that's
Yeah.
really like Batman there.
Hmm.
But the movie I thought was
Oh
terrible. I thought
yeah.
absolutely terrible.
I mean, this is what I've said about Zack Snyder for a long time.
Uh,
His trailers, like the man knows how to frame a shot. He knows how to do set design.
the visual stuff, yeah.
And yeah, like so his trailers, when the only story has to be like there's a beginning, middle, and end to this movie,
Right,
that works. You see it and visually, you're like, holy cow, like this is
right,
gonna be incredible.
right,
And then you
right.
get there and there's no character development, there's no story. It's just like image after image
It's
after
right,
image.
right. It's
And
it's
it's
yeah.
like this weird thing where like you just don't get any substance out of it. And I can't remember the last time a Zack Snyder movie delivered on the substance element of what we saw in the trailers.
Yeah, I can't remember. I mean, I just think he's a in terms of visuals, he's great. He's
Hmm.
absolutely great, phenomenal. You gotta have a good script. If you get a good
Yeah.
script in his hands, the movie would be amazing. But for some reason, he teams up with like these people who they just it's not working. So
Hmm.
that's all. But he, in terms of visuals, he's awesome, awesome.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. And like one thing I think about, like kind of like what we were talking about, these
yeah.
golden age heroes and how do you do that? One thing
Hmm.
that comic books used to do was like there would just be stuff in the background, and they would call back
Hmm.
to it way later, but it was so
Right,
innocent that if that line
right,
got canceled and nothing came of it, you didn't feel left
right,
out. But if it went on long
right,
enough, they'd be like, oh yeah, remember 12 issues ago when there was a picture frame on the desk with so and so in it,
right,
and it was incredible.
right.
And we've developed this culture that seems to believe that like everything in every panel has to be so meticulously laid for something in the future. And
Hmm.
I think Batman versus Superman, like Snyder's movie, was kind of like the ultimate cap on that, where it was like he was writing these movies where he's laying all these itty bitty things for movies he's
Right,
never going to get
right,
to make. Like they're
right,
so bad because they're connected to so much that doesn't exist. I can
Right,
totally
right,
see a
yeah,
vision where in 10 years we're gonna watch Justice League 22 and be like, oh, that all makes sense. Now Batman
right,
versus Superman's a good movie.
right,
But nobody's gonna give you money to get to that point. Like you have to
right,
stop laying so many Easter eggs and start telling stories that work on their own, whether we're talking about comics or movies, like just put stuff there and let it go, and maybe later you can come back to it. But don't plant something important like it's going to come up in 12 issues and get canceled in 6, or else you're going to have a problem. People are not going to like your work at all.
right. That you're highlighting the problems of those DC films at the beginning, when they were making those movies, because they were trying to follow the Marvel thing. Remember, it's
Mm-hmm.
like they were trying to like, we're gonna build
Oh
the
yeah.
whole universe, and it's like you cannot fabricate something like that. It kind of has to grow organically. It kind of has to, like, work, and then you kind of go with
Mm-hmm.
it. But that was the problems of those early DC films, where it's like you're artificially trying to create this connection of movies, and that's why it didn't work. It's like, why don't you focus on telling one good story with a good film, and if it works, then we go to the next one. But yeah, you're right. He's putting all these Easter eggs about movies that have never been made, and I could think of two of the DC films that I thought were good. One of them was, I thought Wonder Woman was good,
Mm-hmm.
except towards the end there was kind of like summer blockbuster kind of nonsense. But
Yeah.
and then I thought Joker, I thought was phenomenal. I
Mm-hmm.
thought Joker was phenomenal. I mean,
Yeah.
yes, it was a dark film, but it was really an excellent film.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's about
I
it. I
thought
can't think of
Shazam was
anyone.
pretty good too.
Yeah, Shazam was fun. That was a fun movie. You
And I
know.
didn't see Aquaman, but a lot of people say if you just take that as like a fun ride, it's pretty good. But I didn't
I
see
heard
that
it.
one, so I can't do
I
it.
heard it was like so close to the comics. Like, even like all the ridiculous designs. Like, yeah, they put it in the movie. I was
Oh.
like, really? Like the ridiculous like outfits, and I was like, yeah, they put it in there. I was like, I didn't see it either, but I heard it was just like over the
Yeah.
top.
Yeah.
Okay. you
But
know?
yeah, I mean, DC has done a lot work, and I think there was two ways to make the system work for them. There was either
Yeah.
the Marvel method of like we're just going to do one film and then one film and let them kind
Yeah.
of like organically build. I
Right.
think
Right.
the other option they had, and probably what they should have done to be different, was to just start with the Justice League movie. Just like, boom, 7 people, here you go, have a
Right.
blast, watch this movie, and
Right.
then whoever the
Right.
internet talks about, whoever comes out of that, start doing
We'll
spin-off
do.
movies with them.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And have
Right.
all of them just introduced at once. The characters that take off will do
Right.
movies and build out the rest of this
Right.
universe from there. But
Right.
they did like
Right.
this halfway thing where you got like Man of Steel, Batman versus Superman, and I think even
Right.
Wonder Woman was out.
Right.
Then we get
Right.
Justice League that introduced like a
Right.
whole other half of the
All the
cast.
others. Right.
Yeah, and then we're like promised all these movies in the future to explain all of this, but more immediately on their slate was like sequels to the movies that took place before. It's like they didn't know what they were doing. They had no
They didn't have a
plan.
plan. Yeah, they had no plan. They didn't, and
Yeah,
you
they
can
should have
see
either
it.
went
They had
all
no
in on
plan.
one half or the other, but not like mixing that
Right.
whole thing. Yeah, it was a terrible.
That's what I felt. Too many cooks in the kitchen. Too many
Mm-hmm.
studio heads. Everybody wanted their thing in. Nobody was like, no, we're gonna do it this way. Everybody wanted, their say, and that's what happens. You need to have leadership, and somebody has to make a decision. Okay, are we gonna do a Justice League movie, or are we gonna do one Superman, one Batman, one Flash? You gotta find a way. You can't tiptoe back and forth, because that's what
Yeah.
happened.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
meanwhile, Marvel did it their way, which is, we're going to release individual movies for each character, and then we're going to bring them together. Okay, you can do it that way, or you can put the team together and then do spin-offs. But this back and forth, I mean, it's just a waste of
Yeah,
time
it's
and
confusing
money.
to your audience. They don't know what to expect anymore. Now we're
Right,
seeing them
right.
kind of like backpedal. They're talking about rebooting the whole universe with
Really?
Flashpoint movie, or just like
Really? They're doing
continuing
it?
individual movies. That's the
Uh-huh.
most recent thing I've seen, is that they're supposed to do. That's why they have this Flashpoint movie with like every different Batman and all this
Oh
stuff.
my God.
They're just going to Flashpoint everything into an omniverse where basically anything and everything exists within canon, but not really in canon. I don't
Let
know.
me
It's
ask
going to
you
get
this.
crazy.
Let me ask you this. What do you think of the Matt Reeves Batman from what you've seen? What do you think? You think it's going to work?
Oh yeah. Um,
Yeah, you think
well,
so?
Okay, here's the thing. They sold me at Matt Reeves. I don't even know much of
Okay.
Matt Reeves' work other
Mm-hmm.
than what he did for the Planet of the Apes,
Yeah.
the second two
Right.
movies there. But
Yeah.
as soon as they said Matt Reeves, I was like, okay, Matt Reeves from Planet of the Apes, that style, when they're like
Right.
running and gunning, and it's like this
Right.
visceral, very like primitive, stripped down style. And they
Right.
had me there. Then they said it's going to
Okay.
be a more detective Batman earlier in his
Right.
career. I'm in.
Right.
I
Okay.
think probably the most troubling element to me is the main guy, the vampire guy.
Patton. Pattinson. Yeah.
Yeah, but honestly, I've heard really good things about his acting based on what he's done since then. And
Mm-hmm.
I thought he was pretty good in the Harry Potter movie he was in, but
Mm-hmm.
everything about Twilight was pretty garbage, in my opinion. So I'm going to
Yeah.
go ahead and be in on Pattinson just because I believe he's a better actor than we've seen in his previous work. And this could very much be his, like Matthew McConaughey or Leonardo DiCaprio, where he picks up a whole second career and we find him to be an incredible actor.
Right. Yeah. I mean, from what I've seen, I'm having what I can't really say much because I don't know Rio's gonna. I know Matt Reeves did Planet of the Apes, although those films I never got into them just because the concept. I know they're well done. I can tell
Mm-hmm.
that they're well done films, but it's just that Planet of the Apes, that concept of like monkeys, like overcoming humanity. I just don't buy it. I mean, I just, I'm just thinking like this just even for me, like this is just too like no, they're
Oh yeah,
monkeys. I mean,
yeah.
but the
It's kind
point
of
is
far
that
fetched. Yeah.
yeah, but the Pattinson, I have only seen a few films, not anything that I just at this point I don't see the Batman there. I
Mm-hmm.
now if they did a Batman Beyond, I think that could work. And if you had Michael Keaton as the original Batman, that would be you have me sold, and you get a right director and a right script right there.
Mm-hmm.
But I know that they're going for a younger Batman. I've seen some of the suit. I think the suit looks really. I mean, I don't like those things on the gauntlets and the
Oh yeah.
helmet. Like it
The
looks,
big
it's all
ears. And,
and it's kind of stitched and but even when I saw the trailer, like he there was a scene where he uses like 20 or 30 punches on one thug. I'm like, I mean, that's one guy. Why would you have such trouble just
yeah.
taking this one guy out? But it's little things like that. But I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I have no idea if this is gonna work or not. I'll give it a shot, but I don't
I
see
mean,
it. But then again,
I
a lot of
think.
people didn't see Keaton either. A lot of people didn't see Michael
Yeah.
Keaton as Batman, and he was
Mm-hmm.
phenomenal. So I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, I think my one other concern with it too is how many villains have been cast.
Right,
I'm hoping a
right,
majority of that is just like in passing, in the background, like unrelated to what's going on. Because we've
right.
already seen what was it, the Amazing Spider-Man 2, where they're like, we're just
Oh, it
gonna
had
have
everybody.
everybody, yeah,
Yeah,
and you
yeah.
get nothing to attach yourself to the movie. Like there's no character to it. There's
It's too
no like
much.
character growth. There's too many things
Yeah,
being introduced and nothing being
right,
tied
right,
up.
right,
And so that's
right.
my one concern is like this is going to be the first like of this franchise or whatever it's going to be, and
Mm-hmm.
they're already planning a bunch of movies and we're going to end up in the same thing as Zack Snyder where like he's got a whole universe
Yeah,
plan, but who's going to get to
and
watch
nothing
it?
happened. Yeah,
Yeah.
and yeah, you're right. There might be a symptom of that. I mean, that you could even, as an example, you could even use the Sam Raimi movies. I thought the first two were great, but
Mm-hmm.
we had one villain in there, and then you went into Spider-Man 3, and once you introduce all these villains, it's not working. I mean, I think it was like three in that movie. They had like the Venom, and then they had Sandman, and then they had the
The
next Green Goblin, or
yeah,
the
New
new Green
Goblin.
Goblin, whatever. And that's just too much. It's like
Mm-hmm.
you only have a certain amount of time, and so
Yeah.
the movie, ironically, Spider-Man 3, there were some great moments of acting in that movie,
Mm-hmm.
but it
Oh
was
yeah.
just too much going on, and it really
Mm-hmm.
hindered, unfortunately. And I think Sam
Yeah.
Raimi is great. I think
Mm-hmm.
he's a great actor. I love Evil Dead 2. And when they said that he was going to do Spider-Man, the first one, right away I said, yeah, it's going to be great.
Yeah.
He's the guy,
Oh yeah.
you know?
Yeah, I agree. I
So,
think I think they could have done something with Venom, like introduced him in that movie. I don't
Yeah.
think making him a major player, that was a terrible idea, and it really messed up the whole flow of the storytelling. He was just always this extra thing there, you know.
Right. Right.
Um, I don't. I'm Yeah. I'm like 99% sure that post trailer things weren't a thing at that time. But how great
Hmm.
would it have been if we had got Sandman and the whole like new Goblin turning a new cheek or whatever, you know?
Right.
That
Right.
story could have worked, and then
Right.
your after credit stinger could have been like the Venom symbiote showing up,
Right.
and
For
then
Spider-Man
Spider-Man
4.
4 could have went into it, and that would have
Right.
been great.
That would have
But
been great.
bringing Venom
Yeah.
in as like a key component to the story after the whole movie was already shot and everything, like it didn't
Right.
work. And they,
Right.
at best, they could have went into a few shots and maybe added in the symbiote in the background and kind of started to
Right.
seed that idea. But
Right.
bringing him
Right.
in ruined that movie and kind of ruins the franchise almost, you know?
It did. Yeah, I could tell that was just the studio heads. Like, I want to see
No,
Venom,
yeah.
and Sam Raimi is like, but he's not in the story. I don't care. I want to see Venom. It's
Yeah,
like,
well, that's one of the earliest examples of the internet having their voice heard when in a time when it wasn't good, you know, because
right.
they say a majority of that was like Facebook was just like really getting big and stuff, and
Hmm.
everything on Facebook was just about like how Venom had better be in Spider-Man 3 or else they're just trying to screw it all up and stuff. And the studio heads got legitimately worried that people weren't going to go watch the movie because of everything they were seeing on the internet. And they forced
Right.
and like crammed Venom into it as much as possible because they were scared nobody was going to go watch it. And that's almost, I mean, that's basically the beginning of what we're seeing now with this new Snyder cut. And I don't
Hmm.
think this is going to be any good either. I think it's visually
Wait.
very appealing in the trailers, but I think once that hits, people are going to feel like it just falls apart so quick.
So yeah. So what do you think of that? Because when I heard that they were doing that, honestly, what is it in the Snyder cut? Because to me, I bet you what you're gonna see are a bunch of scenes that were deleted, scenes that were shot for specifically for this. But I just don't see how it's gonna be any better necessarily as what we saw already. I mean, the tone maybe is gonna be more consistent with Snyder. It's not gonna be
Hmm.
the Josh Whedon because I can tell in that movie it wasn't working because Josh Whedon put his humor. It's not
Yeah.
working because there was colliding elements in that
Hmm.
movie. So this
I
one, at
think
least the
either
tone
one
is
of
going to be
their
consistent.
visions would have been a better movie, you know? Like
Right,
either one of
right.
their movies would have been better than what we got out of that.
That
I still
makes
don't know that
right.
either of them would have been good, though.
So
It
so are you going to see the new one, the Snyder cut? You're going to see
I have HBO Max, so I'm not ruling it
it.
out. But it's never been on my list. Like
Yeah, me
I'm,
neither.
I really liked Dawn of the Dead. Like
Hmm.
Snyder crushed it with Dawn of the Dead. I didn't know anything
Hmm.
about it. I watched the movie. It delivered. So there was no
Right.
trailer for me to judge that by. Really,
Hmm.
um, 300 I think was good. But it was like hyper stylized, and it was still like hungry for success.
Right.
Zack
Right.
Snyder. Now
Hmm.
you have Watchmen, which just really didn't do it for me.
Right. Me neither. I didn't really care for it.
Visually, it looked great. The story, I think he messed up.
Right.
Sucker Punch, I was really into the trailers for that, and it
Uh huh.
promised so much about how their backstories and justifying them being like strippers or whatever.
Right.
Like this is not me trying to exploit young girls. Watch, you're gonna see the movie and learn the story and be like, "Oh, you're a genius." Well,
Right.
no, that movie was boring. There was no substance. It was all just like a 12-year-old fever dream.
Right.
Um, Man of Steel was
Right.
okay, but again, it was
Right.
just like all the Snyderness to it that I didn't really care
Right.
for.
Right.
Batman versus Superman was so overhyped. Like, and it's just
Yeah.
this trend of
Yeah.
like you always see his trailers, and because there's no tangible story to it, you
Right.
go, that
Right.
looks great, like
Right.
there's a
It's
beginning and middle
visual.
end to this movie.
Right.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And then you go
Hmm.
see the movie and it's like, yeah, but there's
It's
nothing to
horrible.
connect the beginning, middle, and end.
Right.
And I
Right.
believe that's what we're getting in these trailers and all this stuff he's putting out about his new six
The
episode
Snyder cut.
dumpster fire is going to be
Right.
like, I think it's going to be 4 episodes that people are really into because it's going to keep
Right.
building and like there's all these plot threads, there's all these plot threads, and
See,
about episode 5, people are going to
hmm
realize he has no plan to tie
there's
any of
nothing
those threads
there.
together.
Yeah, yeah, and like I said,
It's going to be
I
like
don't
Game
know.
of Thrones. It's
Yeah,
exactly what I see. It's going to be so good
I
for like
mean,
4 or 5. You're going to be like, what? And then the 6th
right.
episode, people are going to crap on it.
I mean, I just don't understand why. Maybe it's a loyalty thing, but you gotta get good writers because the visuals he has it down, but you gotta get somebody new who's good at writing or
Hmm.
something, and that will change. I mean, people suddenly will be like, "Wow, Zack Snyder movies are great." Well, they have the potential, but the writing, the script is not there. And I don't
Yeah.
know why he hasn't get somebody who knows how to write. Don't keep
Hmm.
this, David S. Goyer or something. Let's get David S. Goyer to make another movie that's like gonna suck.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't get
Well,
it.
but I think there's also a problem with Snyder of like the chains have been unleashed, like I think he blew up too quick, too fast. People were gambling on what he was going to become and not what he was. And
Hmm
I kind of think of him almost as like an egomaniac that's like, I need to control my sets. I need to control this movie, like,
hmm
yeah, he'll get a
hmm
writer, but the writer's a yes man. And then he takes the script and
Right.
does whatever he wants with it. Like,
Whatever he
to
wants.
me,
Yeah.
yeah, Snyder would be at his best if WB just like gives him a bunch of money to sit down and stay in the corner and like give them notes and they'll like take some of them into consideration. Like I
Right.
think
Right.
elements of his vision are great. I think he would be a great
Right.
like producer or
Yeah.
like consultant, but I don't think
Yeah.
he needs to be making movies purely in his own like puritanical tunnel
Right.
vision way.
I think he needs somebody to edit him. Like, Zach, this.
Mhm.
I know you want to do this, but this is not working. You got to let this one
Yeah.
go. You need. It kind of reminds me of like almost like a George Lucas, where those early movies worked
Mhm.
because he had to work with people who were telling George like, why don't we put this in the script? So it worked. But once you got to Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones, when it was purely him, that's what
Yeah.
happened.
Yeah, too
Visual
much
guy,
creative control. Yeah.
right? So you gotta have
Mhm.
people like writers, Lawrence Kasdan or something, to
Yeah.
help edit you a little bit.
Yeah, come in and rein him in and get him on point and stay focused cuz
That's what it
yeah,
is.
I mean George Lucas, he came back,
He's a
he messed
genius.
up. Oh yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
the original movies, the original trilogy, it's so good because it's just like these
Yeah.
like very non-pretentious shots. It's just like we're
You're
gonna
right.
look at a desert and like this thing's gonna happen. And
Right.
things were always happening on camera, but it was like
Right.
never there for you to see.
Right.
And
Right.
and then he went back and like over the years has added so much stuff
Oh
that he
yeah.
just wants you to
I
see,
know.
and you get to
I.
like, to me, the sequel, or what is the prequels, at that point what
Right.
he was doing was like trying to capture the magic of the first one, but he was too
Right.
deliberate, and he's like, okay, well, remember how great people love that shot with that one thing here, so now we're going to copy that shot and put this thing here, but this thing needs to mean something later down the road, even though we
Right.
haven't got there yet.
Right.
And before,
Right.
he would be like, down the road, he'd be like, oh, remember that shot that had that thing, now we can connect that and people will love that.
Yeah.
And I think
It's
he just got too much into his own process.
it's unfortunate, but I think sometimes that happens when you become so successful. You kind of live in a bubble, and you kind of lose sense of like authenticity in your work. I think
Hmm.
the original trilogy, there was something really honest about that stuff, and to this day,
Hmm.
I've never seen the original Star Wars. I've only seen the edited to death, added CGI. We're talking. Let's put a rock in front of R2D2. Like, why
Yeah.
would you put a CGI? I mean, what's wrong with the original shot? Like, you spent all this money to put a rock in front of, like, things like
Hmm.
that. It's just like, why are you doing this? Like,
Yeah.
you know, it's
Yeah.
just too much. It's
Yeah.
just too much.
It's yeah.
So
I just couldn't imagine somebody going back and re-editing their movie, especially at that scale. To be like, this is like one of the most famous movies, most influential movies of all time, and for him to go back
yeah.
and change it is like, what are you doing?
And it's like it's one of the most analyzed film trilogies. It's like people know these
Hmm.
shot for shot, and you deliberately make the tiniest adjustments. Like, let's make this character blink or something, or like,
Yeah.
or like the worst one. How about we have Greedo shoot first? What? And do it in such an awkward way that it's like physically
Yeah.
impossible. Why did you do that? Like, I always question things like that. What was the purpose of that? I mean,
Hmm.
the whole character of Han Solo, that cemented that this guy was a dangerous guy. He would shoot first. That was the thing.
Yeah.
But now, oh no, I don't know why he did that. I don't know why he did
Yeah.
that.
I
And
don't know.
now I'm
And
pretty sure he's regretting it because he's like, look what Disney did to his freaking, you know, franchise.
well,
It's destroyed
I
it.
hope so. Unfortunately, history shows us if we don't like the changes he does, he goes and does more.
Right.
So I don't know. He might love what Disney's doing, you know?
I don't know. I mean, but
He
let
might
me
be the
ask you this
one
then.
cheerleader.
Right. But let me ask you this. So, what do you think of Mandalorian? What do you think of that?
Haven't watched it, so I really can't. I
Oh, you
turned
haven't
it
seen it
on.
at all? Like, no? Uh-huh.
I turned it on. I watched like the first 15 minutes of the first episode, and
Uh-huh.
I don't know. It's just that thing I was talking about earlier. Like I just lose interest. I'm like, man, I wish I had a comic to read right now, and so I just turn it off and go read a comic. Like,
Well, I'll say this about it, and then I can kind of let that go. But it's I saw the Disney films, all of the newer ones,
hmm
and I thought the first one, The Force Awakens, I thought was very commercial, but it had elements that really made it feel like the original Star Wars, even though it felt
hmm
kind of superficial, but it was fun and it was kind of lighthearted. Logically, some things didn't make sense and it was very commercial, but I understood that this was a movie designed for a younger audience to
hmm
introduce them to the world of Star Wars. So I get that. After those two, like after that one, the other two, Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker, I
hmm
thought they were terrible. I thought they were absolutely
Yeah.
terrible, meaningless, devoid of any. It was a mess. I mean,
hmm
so in comparison, have you seen those by the way? Those other two?
I've seen. Okay, I agree with you 100% on
Uh-huh.
Force Awakens. That
Yeah.
movie was like it had the spirit and stuff there, but it was like super bubblegum polished for a younger
Yeah.
audience, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I really appreciated what they did with that and like trying to
Hmm.
appeal to everybody and give us
Right.
this new Star. Like I really appreciate what they did, even if it's not
R-
my favorite Star Wars film.
Right.
Um,
Right.
I am a huge fan of Ryan Johnson. Like his movies are some of my favorite, but that
Uh-huh.
eighth movie is so bad. I
I know.
cannot stand it.
I
From the
know.
very
I
first, I was
know.
sitting in the theater, right, and it opens
With the
with
joke. With the
yeah, with
joke.
the joke.
Right.
And as soon as I heard that joke, I was like, I'm
It
out.
was.
Like this isn't gonna
Yeah.
work.
Yeah. That was the
It
moment.
was
I
the
said,
most
"Why?"
Marvel thing they've ever done in Star Wars. It was insane.
Yeah, I was in the theater, and when that happened, I was like, what? Why would you start a Star Wars movie like that? And then
Yeah.
that was not the only thing. It was so many things in that movie. The worst one probably
Oh
was
yeah.
Leia flying. Leia flying.
hmm
That was like,
Yeah.
it's just like
And
this
like
is
to me,
ridiculous.
what I hate is like I know there's a justification somewhere in there if you really worked it, but they didn't. They were just like people are gonna accept this like really dumb looking thing.
Right, like just
They'll just like it. Why would we
right.
like that?
I hated it. I thought it was
Uh
terrible. I thought it was absolutely
Finn's
terrible.
character, just like I mean, they pushed him so hard in the previews for episode
Right,
7,
right.
and in 7 he had a little bit going
He had a
on, and then
story
at
there. Yeah.
yeah, and then at 8 they were just like, forget about that guy. Like,
Nothing. Forget about him. Yeah. It's like
yeah,
that. That was another thing. It's like, why are you putting him on this side mission on a casino planet? Why is he with, Rose Tico? What is going on? It's like, what? I was interested
a
about the
side mission that
stormtrooper.
meant nothing.
That meant nothing. Right. That meant
Yeah,
nothing.
I'm all
It's
for
like,
them
so
like
why?
breaking up and going on missions or something, but that mission meant nothing.
Nothing. You could have taken it out and it wouldn't have affected the movie at
Not at
all.
all. Yeah.
So it's like, why did you put it in there? To talk
Yeah,
about greed
it
or
was
something?
literally there so that like when they talk to Finn at the beginning of the movie and they talk
Right.
to Finn at the end of the movie, like he's not in the
Right.
same place. Because otherwise he would have had no reason to leave that hospital bed at the very beginning.
Right. Right. Well,
Like they gave him nothing to do except for a fake mission. so that he wouldn't be in the
Right. That
same
meant
place
nothing.
through the movie. Yeah,
Basically, okay, but it meant
yeah,
nothing anyway. So okay.
yeah.
And then,
I
did you
do
see the last
believe
one?
I still have not even seen the
No.
last one. Uh, I don't know. I've heard that
You probably don't
he
care.
worked. Yeah, I hear that Abrams worked really hard to kind of like try to make it work in some way, but
He
I
tried.
I don't know. I'm so done. I like
He,
I've come
you're
to
no, I,
understand either Star Wars has gotten really bad, or
mhm.
I'm just some kind of purist that only likes the original trilogy and um the other one where they go to get the plans.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. Rogue One,
I-
right? Rogue One.
Rogue One. Yeah, I thought that one
Hmm.
was amazing. I love that one.
Yeah. Well, I would say that it's just Disney doesn't really understand Star Wars. They don't really know what they have, and unfortunately, they don't have people that they're allowing, in their company to tell them, okay, this is what this is about. Now, getting back to Mandalorian, I think with Mandalorian, it feels there are times where it feels like vintage Star Wars. There are
Hmm.
moments where it feels like vintage Star Wars. However, the show is becoming predictable. It's formulaic, and I can't see where they're gonna go with a season two, let alone a season three. I think the season one actually started off strong. There were some episodes that didn't work, but it's kind of losing uh,
Yeah.
inventiveness because it's becoming formulaic. It's a western
Well.
essentially.
Hmm.
And
Well, see,
so
and what I've heard
that's yeah.
the most recent reviews I've heard of it actually, what people are saying is Baby Yoda. Like Baby Yoda has cannibalized the whole thing, and people are literally tuning in now to see if it's a Baby
Just
Yoda episode, and if it's not,
right.
they don't watch it. People are turning it
They
off
don't
if it's
watch
not
it.
about Baby Yoda.
You know what? I mean, Baby Yoda was interesting with season one because I did not expect that. That's what kind of made it
Yeah.
great. So you kind of gotta have something that people don't expect in order for you to entice them into the next one. So like
Hmm.
they got to do that. But what they're doing with this new season is they're just giving you of like, hey, remember this from the old trilogy? We're kind of showing you something that reminds you of that, and then like they're doing that fan service thing again, and
Hmm.
so it's kind of becoming boring, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So, you know,
Well, I mean,
um,
it's almost like if you made a romantic comedy about a
right,
guy falling in love with a girl, but
right,
at the beginning of the movie, he buys her the cutest little puppy in the world, and
right,
suddenly the whole movie just turns into a puppy movie. Like
right,
the the cuteness factor hooked people in, yes, but it
right,
also kind of
right,
cannibalized the success you could have with any other
right.
storytelling because what got what got these millennials' wives to sit down and watch Star Wars with them for the first time
Was the
is also
Yoda?
what's
Was
going
the
to make
Yoda?
them no longer want to watch Star Wars with them.
Right, right. Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right, for sure.
Yeah, it's a
Um,
weird thing. I don't. I haven't watched it. I do want to watch it, because I know it's a little more connected to the stuff that I do like from Star Wars. But
right.
people are just like so much into it right now, and I can't force myself to sit down and watch anything right now.
Right, right. No, it makes sense. I'm losing interest as well. I didn't even realize it. Like weeks will go by, and oh, there's like two episodes. Okay, I mean, if I have the time, I'll watch it. But I'm not like waiting for it. No, that's
Hmm.
not real. But no, man. But so let me say real quick. So it's so the in terms of like the comics, do you? I know because I mean, do you go still to shops? Do you order them? Do you buy online, or how do you get your comics because of the COVID thing? So I don't know. Like how do you get them?
Yeah, I have a like a pull box in my local store,
Hmm.
and so they
Really?
pull all the books that they order any books that I want that I have on my list. They'll order them to make sure I get a copy. They'll put them in my box,
Right.
and then I can go Wednesday and pick them up. I
Nice.
do like kind of like walk around the shop and see what books have come out or whatever, but I typically
Hmm.
don't touch anything I don't intend to buy. And most everything that I do want, I already know is coming out, so I can come in and they just hand me the stack of books out of my box, and I don't have to worry about
That's
hanging out in the store too long.
so you have like long boxes and stuff like that, or books and stuff like that.
What, like here at the house?
Yeah, like you have like long boxes of books, or
Hmm.
because you
Yeah,
you
I
put like
have.
the floppies. So
Yeah, I
Uh-huh.
have like two short boxes right here. I have a long box under some stuff here.
My
Uh,
God. So you
like these are
definitely
all
like,
the
right,
yeah.
right. Oh my God. Yeah, you got
These are all I
so these
picked
are
up
the have
last
you
week.
read those? So you haven't read those yet.
No, I've read most of these actually.
Okay. All right.
Yeah,
Wow, look at
this is
that. Okay.
this is kind of like the current hotness right here. I don't know if you saw that came out.
The last one. Yeah, I've heard about it. Is it good? Last one?
Yeah, that was the
Okay.
first issue. That's the only one that's come out so far, but it starts out good. Um,
Okay.
it's kind of like in a Dark Knight esque world.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and but what's really cool, it's almost like your comic here. Actually, thinking about it now,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's like a very straight. It follows one turtle, and he like infiltrates a city in the future, and he like kind of is like sneaking around the shadows. He's after the bad guy. Things don't go right. He ends up getting knocked back down, and he falls into the
Right.
sewer. So it's a real
Right.
straight, like just action story. You know, you follow the single character narrative into this infiltration and then back out of it. You know,
Right.
and that's kind of where it cliffhangs us. It doesn't spend a lot of time like developing this future world that they're in and stuff, but I
Mm-hmm.
kind of
Mm-hmm.
like that because it leaves so much to learn about, and you see it because
Right.
like it starts with basically like an aerial shot of like New York City, and it kind of like comes into it, you know, and you see
Mm-hmm.
like it's it's got like future tech and like futuristic looking buildings, but it's also real dirty and grungy and swampy too, you know. So there's a lot of
Right.
questions about the world as what it's become and how it became this, but they don't waste a bunch of time in the story going, "Oh yeah, this is because of this thing and this is because of this thing." So,
Yeah, it's even in the comic I did, the Wallbreakers book. I knew that I wanted to do it in New York, and but I wanted it little things about it where you kind of saw it as being a slightly in the future New York. So
mhm.
some like the book kind of like some reviewers picked it up where they was like these they were like these floating kind of like camera looking things like
Mhm.
flying above the city. So
Yeah,
and the design of that, yeah, they were like I don't know, they call like scanners or something. But the original, if you look at the book, the way I drew, there's like two models because
mhm.
the book Drew had asked me that I need to add two extra pages to towards the end of the book. So those two pages at the end were added because Drew said you need to add it in order for it to be like more of a complete book. So if you look at the design, at the end it's a more modern, stripped down design. But at the beginning of the book, it looks kind of like an egg beater or something. Like it has this kind of thing in the
Yeah, I
middle,
was
and
gonna say because I know exactly
yeah,
what you
it's
mean. At the beginning,
yeah,
it's like a ring with a camera sticking off of it, but then it has
and
like this like egg
this
shaped center.
in the middle, right?
And then
And then
at the end, it looks more like a Roomba. It's like a flat
right,
disc. Yeah.
right, right. So and I did that just because I felt like, well, maybe this is a newer model because that does exist. There's different cameras with different models and stuff like that. So I just put it that way. But and I left the book kind of somewhat because I have got questions about that. Like, well, I mean, is the character dead? Is he? We don't know. And I kind of imply that it is, but I've already thought about like if I were to do a second one, I always want to do the next book has to be even bigger, even bolder. So,
Hmm.
this one was like whatever 28 or 26 pages. The next book would have to be double or even triple in length, and it would be in color. It would be like
Oh,
bigger,
okay.
much bigger. Yeah, much bigger, much broader, and it would take a crazy turn because these are the points of these books. It's like let's do some crazy stuff. Like let's just take it in a different direction.
Yeah.
If I do a sequel for that one particular
Well,
book, and yeah,
let me ask you about like the design choices and stuff because some
yeah,
things that stood out to me was you know the camera thing you were just describing.
yeah, yeah,
That changes between the beginning and the end. But
mm-hmm.
he has a watch, and it's like
Right,
not really a Apple smartwatch like we think, but
right,
it is like a video phone watch.
mm-hmm.
A lot of the architecture we see is very like Spider-Man inspired buildings and
Right,
stuff. And
mm-hmm.
then the cars, though, they kind of have like these long bodies, like you see like in 50s designs or something.
Yeah, yeah.
Specifically like the one car that he like pulls the old man out of.
Right.
Like it reminded me
Right.
a lot of like the Batman the animated series, how it's kind of
That
inspired by
that
like the
that kind of
50s
like,
design.
yeah, like I remember the you bring up the animated series. He had like that car looked like an ice cream sandwich. I remember it kind of was like that long kind of ice cream thing. No,
Hmm.
that specific car, because I wanted in the book there to be, I wanted the book to be kind of difficult to make, and I wanted to draw things that I wasn't comfortable with. So a lot of what I put in the book was like, okay, I never draw like a specific type of car, and that car does exist. It's a Mercedes Benz 300 SL. They call it
Oh,
the
okay.
Gull Wing because the doors open up on the sides like that when you
Hmm.
open them up, and that's a vintage car. So that's why it has that specific look. It's a curvier car. It's a little bit longer,
Yeah.
and it's just a beautiful car. And I wanted that specific car, and I had to draw it from all the different angles, from the back and the side and the front and all this kind of stuff. So I did it, as it because it was like challenging, and I knew it would be difficult, but I wanted a specific car. And I thought
Okay.
about other cars. I thought about a Ferrari, Lamborghini, Dodge Viper, but I thought those cars were too recognizable, and also they were too aggressive looking, and I wanted something a little bit more simpler, smoother lines, elegant kind of, but vintage looking, but not like too heavy with the design, kind of more simplistic.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the one I picked for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, what about okay? So our main character, right?
Right.
He pulls out this katana and he slices the alien in half, which I
Right.
loved. I thought that was a great way to kind of explore what this creature may or may not be. Does he
Right.
have
Right.
any actual katana skills? Because he seems unassuming, and I didn't think he would. But then the way
Right.
he draws it and everything, he's almost seems like he knows what he's doing with it.
Yeah, I would say that I think if let's say I think if anybody is under a instant threat of like something that is inhuman looking is launching itself at your face or at your body, I think you're gonna be real skilled real fast. I mean, because it's not a sword fight. Whatever is
Yeah,
sharp and whatever is long, you're gonna use it like this. You're
yeah,
gonna like just take it out and just whatever, right? So
yeah.
I mean, he's not gonna sword fight. I mean, probably get killed or something. So that's really what it was. It was a move of pure desperation. Like, I don't know what
Just
this
yeah,
is.
desperate instinct.
Get it? Yeah, just kill it. Whatever it is, chop it down. So that's what that was about. But that was kind of funny. And the creatures themselves, I imagine that if you ever imagine like sometimes kids like to play with these kind of mushy jelly kind of toys that you
Hmm.
can squeeze them, and they never pop. That's what
Yeah.
that thing is kind of made of. Except if you irritate the creature, it will puff up like a puffer fish, and the spikes will come out, and spines will come out.
Hmm.
And so that's kind of what you see in the book. It's like he's kind of like struggling with it,
Yeah.
and then he just puff up, and all these little spikes come out.
Yeah, I
And
love
so
that
that's
panel
kind of,
by the way.
yeah,
Like
it's
it did a really good job of expressing like he's holding this thing and spikes come through his hand.
right, right. And I think I showed him like pulling the the pines out of his hand, like
Hmm.
pulling and it's kind of disgusting. I remember hearing like one of the comic book professionals. He was like he thought that was like disgusting. Why would you try
Yeah.
pulling this thing? But I said, yeah, it
I don't
is,
know.
but I don't know. I put it in there. So
Yeah, I think it's important because it shows like how much this is affecting him. Like, he
right.
has to pull each of these out and like it's all these little barbs and you can see how painful that is, you know.
And he has to wrap his hands, right, because it's like you're
Hmm.
walking around with a bunch of holes in your hands, so you got to wrap it up. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
It's
then
pretty
I love
brutal.
yeah. And then I just
Yeah,
love the
yeah.
page after that. Like he throws the chair out and just like the way he comes flying out of that window.
it's it's insane. Yeah, it's it's just it's like it's aggressive. It's like because like well, think about it. Like, is he gonna open the door and run down the stairs? Your entire apartment is being filled with these creatures. I don't
Hmm.
really. I mean, you're in desperation mode, so you're like, okay, how high is this apartment? I might live. So why don't I just throw the chair out? Because I can either die here or I can die on the pit. You got to pick one. So it's like, yeah, it's kind of crazy. I mean, it's pretty insane.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I don't know.
Yeah, it was really cool though. I love the way he comes flying out of there, and then that's pretty much the moment where it's just like go go go.
Hey, go
No
go
time to
go.
explain. Yeah.
No, no, there's no time. You know,
He runs up, he
um,
like grabs her, throws her out, and
right.
I guess that's where like to me it got kind of interesting too because like how many of these things are there and where are they coming from, and they just like keep growing and building
They
and they're
just keep growing.
chasing.
Yeah, they're coming out of this wall, and they just come. And for some reason, they're chasing this guy. They're chasing this one
Hmm.
guy. I mean, yes, people are fleeing for their lives, but they're coming after this one guy.
Yeah.
So, but I thought it was like, yeah, it's just frantic. I'm thinking of movies like, Die Hard 3 when
Hmm.
Bruce Willis is like, in a cab, like running through Central Park. I just wanted something frantic like that. It's like
Yeah.
crazy like that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Um,
that's what I did.
like you don't have to give any details here, but like, do you
Yeah.
know like where these are coming from and how they're being created, or is you're still just kind of like
Um,
playing it by ear?
well, as far as I know, it's the only thing that I can think of is that these things are I wouldn't say I could say interdimensional, but that's kind of like George Lucasy and probably common. A lot of people use that term
Hmm.
interdimensional, whatever.
Yeah.
But these are creatures that are probably from hell or something. I don't know where they're from, but I'm not exactly sure. But that's something that I might tackle if I do a sequel. Where we kind of get a little more into the origin of what is the purpose of these things.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this one was just all about like let's do a book that's really difficult. A lot of it was just let's do something that was really difficult for me, and it was really really difficult. But I'm glad
Yeah.
that you was able to enjoy it. I mean,
Hmm.
because not everybody saw it for a long time. A lot of people didn't see it, so it kind of was
Oh,
just
okay.
there, and only professionals saw it, but nobody really saw it.
Oh,
Until Drew got it out there, basically.
yeah. Yeah, there's this other book I picked up off of like a Kickstarter campaign called
Yes.
Pablo the Gorilla.
Hmm.
And that one's kind of like this. Like there's this gorilla and he's got like a robotic arm. Actually, he has two robotic arms and he delivers pizza. And so the issue starts with him going to deliver pizza to this guy's apartment.
Uh
And
huh.
whenever the guy opens the door, like a spear comes through the back of his head
Oh
and he
my
falls
god.
over dead. And there's like this stone creature guy with spears standing there, and then him and this gorilla just start fighting it out. It's almost like the chicken and Family Guy thing. And that's
Right, right,
basically the whole issue is these two fighting across like the whole city, but like in a very like action packed kind of way like this, where it's just like go
right,
go go go.
right,
And
right,
it's
right,
like it's a book. I mean, it takes me like 5-10 minutes to read it, but I
right,
read it every
right,
couple months because it's just like really fun. There's
right,
no rhyme or
right.
reason to it. Why does this gorilla have metal arms? Why does he deliver pizza as a job? And
Hmm.
who is this guy that wants to fight him all of a sudden? But it's
Right.
it's just a really good ride.
Yeah, yeah, okay, yeah. No, I'm glad. I'm glad. Luckily, luckily, like the Wallbreakers book is gotten like pretty good feedback, and I'm happy for that. A lot of people seem to be digging it. And it's just fun. I love it. I love it. So
Hmm.
yeah, it's great.
Yeah, I really like it. I guess my only other question is
Yeah.
the cop smoking the cigarette at the end.
Yes. Hmm.
What is the thought on that scene? Because that one is a little bit weird to me. Because he's like
Right.
outside and he's smoking the cigarette, and then all of a sudden the guy's like, "Hey, look, what was he doing at the scene in the first place?"
I think when I drew that, I think it's they, because of the chair that was thrown out of the window. It has like broken window
Mm-hmm.
there, and I'm sure they were called there because they had reports of whatever something
Yeah.
bursting
So
out
like
of the
securing
window.
the crime scene
So
and stuff.
you're right. They have secured the thing there. So he was probably just standing around and just okay. I'm not doing anything here. Let me smoke a cigarette or something. Until I
Yeah.
guess if I remember correctly, he looks. behind him or something like that, and the cigarette drops, signifying that he kind of has his mouth open,
Yeah.
noticing that there's something inhuman coming out of there. And then the next panel is like that giant creature, like just
Yeah.
exploding the
Yeah,
whole
because
top
he's like
half.
lighting it, and then the other guy like points, and he kind of like
Right,
looks, and then
right,
drops the cigarette, and then the next page is like from
right.
behind
It's
him.
like that. Right, right, yeah. So, right, but that's what it was. Some cops are just at the crime scene and they just kind of hang out.
Okay.
You know.
Yeah, I didn't think about it at the
Yeah,
time, but that kind of makes more sense. They were probably like roping off a crime scene. I was like, this is a
yeah,
weird place to go back to, but it makes sense because there would be like things going on that he left behind, you know?
yeah, yeah. But yeah, yeah, pretty much. So,
Yeah.
so,
Well, I
so,
mean, that's.
yeah, that's
Go
it,
ahead.
right? You don't have any more questions about that?
About the book specifically, no. I mean,
Yeah. Okay.
like I said, I think it was a lot of fun. You know, it's
Thank you.
not deconstruction. It's not like
Right.
Watchmen or something. We're not trying to like
Right.
make people overthink
Right.
about this. Like, it really
Right.
is like just like this great like action piece that
Right.
just like
Right.
you pick up in this guy's life. There's like this strange thing happening. All of a sudden, boom, he's on the
Yeah.
run from something, and it's unwilling to stop.
Right.
You know, almost
Yeah. Pretty
like
straightforward.
Terminator 2. You know.
Right. Yeah. Yes. Pretty straightforward. I just wanted something like that, fast, hard hitting, visceral, stuff like that. So, but
Yeah,
yeah, that's kind of what I look for. Yeah. But hey, man, I'm glad you liked it. Really appreciate it.
yeah, yeah. I really enjoyed it. I guess my question for you now is, where can people find you? Where can people find your work? And
Yeah.
what's the story on Wall Breakers? Where can we get that?
Yeah. Well, basically, everything you can look up snoigworks.com. That's Drew, the publisher. That's his site. He has Wallbreakers and a bunch of other books. Also, he's publishing that I highly recommend. But my book is there. It's on Comixology. It's like Drive Through Comics, a whole bunch of other places. But snoigworks.com. That's where it's at. And if you want, you could follow me on Instagram at simplerboulder.com. So simpler, just like simpler. Boulder, not the rock, but bold, like text, like Boulder. Yeah, like simpler Boulder at Instagram. And I post like drawings and you can get to see my artwork and whatever. If I'm working on new stuff, you'll see it there. And yeah, that's basically it. So, but shout out
Is
to
that all
Drew
one
because he
word?
set it up. Simpler Boulder, yeah. Simpler Boulder is just
Okay.
connected. Simpler
No,
Boulder
no
at
underscores
Instagram.
or anything.
No underscores, just Simpler Boulder.
Okay, just simpler
Yeah,
Boulder.
that's it.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, and of
And then
course,
what'd you say
Snowy
about Drew?
Works. Drew, yeah, he's the guy that's running Snowy Works. So shout out to him. He's a great
Oh,
guy.
okay.
He basically made this thing happen, and
Yeah.
yeah, we're kind of just having fun with it. So shout out to him.